Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few wide receivers I looked at off the waiver wire this week. The first receiver, Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers. So it looks like he was operating as the number one wide receiver for this Panther team, where they don't have much going in the passing game. I know they got Xavier Legette, obviously, over there. Got Jalen Coker, but he's been banged up, missing ball games. David Moore as well. And Adam Thielen, he stepped up and he gave them the lead in that ball game late in the fourth quarter, where they went on to lose in overtime. So the last 2 weeks since he returned from injury was Thielen. Week 12 versus Kansas City, 3 catches, 57 yards. And week 13, a big ball game versus Tampa Bay. 8 catches, 99 yards, a touchdown on a whopping 10 targets. So week 14, it's going to be a tough matchup at Philadelphia, one of the best teams and one of the better defenses in the league. But this could be a ball game where they're trailing early and often is Carolina and chasing points. And there could be a lot of garbage time for Adam Thielen. So Adam Thielen, still at his age, I think he's a decent route runner. Him and Bryce Young definitely have a good rapport going back to last season. And we obviously saw it at the end of the fourth quarter in that ball game between Bryce Young and Adam Thielen. So right now, well, he's available in 69% of fantasy leagues, and his playoff schedule is pretty favorable in my opinion. Versus Dallas week 15, Arizona week 16, and at Tampa in week 17. He's definitely someone to get off the wire this week. The next wide receiver, Marquez Valdes-Scantling of the New Orleans Saints, MVS. Ever since he signed with the Saints, he's had great success in the last month of the season, and he's been a nice deep ball threat after obviously Shaheed's been out for the year, going back multiple weeks, and he's the deep threat for Derek Carr. We know Carr likes airing that football out. Now the last 3 ball games have been big numbers for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Week 10 versus Atlanta, 3 catches, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 11 versus Cleveland, 2 catches, 87 yards, a touchdown. And week 13 versus the Rams, 2 catches, 36 yards, and a touchdown on a 31-yard touchdown. So I know the targets haven't been up there. I know even the receptions haven't been there, but he's finding the end zone 3 weeks in a row with 4 touchdowns as MVS. And this is a good matchup coming up here in week 14 at the New York Giants, a secondary that can't stop anyone. And I think Valdes-Scantling, it wouldn't be surprising to me if he goes out there once again, has a big ball game, and finds the end zone. Next receiver, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine of the Tennessee Titans. I've been mentioning Westbrook-Ikhine for multiple weeks, and he just goes out there and he finds the end zone weekly for this Tennessee Titan team. So now, the last 6 games, he's got a touchdown in 5 of them, including 7 touchdowns in the time is Westbrook-Ikhine. Week 11 versus Minnesota, 2 catches, 117 yards, a touchdown on a 98-yard touchdown. Week 12 at Houston, 2 catches, 48 yards, a touchdown. And week 13 at the Commanders, 3 catches, 61 yards, and 2 touchdowns with a nice 8 targets. So Westbrook-Ikhine, he's locked in, obviously, Will Levis. We know Will Levis has a big arm. He likes stretching the field. And also this team, they've been trailing all season long, playing catch-up in a lot of garbage time, where he's getting fantasy points that way as well. So this week here in a tight contested division matchup between these 2 bad teams in Jacksonville and Tennessee, I think Westbrook-Ikhine could go out there once again. Definitely a great possibility he could find the end zone. And the Jaguars give up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. So Westbrook-Ikhine available right now in tons of fantasy leagues at 83%. The next wide receiver I look to get off the wire is Joshua Palmer of Los Angeles Chargers. So we don't know how serious the knee injury here is for Ladd McConkey, where he had a monster first half, over 100 yards in that game at the Atlanta Falcons. And then totally he didn't do much the rest of the ball game in that one, obviously going down with injuries. So Joshua Palmer will be the next man up, him and Quentin Johnston for this Los Angeles Charger team. And Palmer, I know the numbers haven't been great, operating as the number 3 receiver over the last few weeks, but we've seen in expanded roles throughout the years. When Keenan Allen or Mike Williams miss time, Palmer could go out there and get the football, and him and Justin Herbert have great rapport. So right now, available in tons of fantasy leagues at 85%. If this injury is serious, he's going to be a starter, obviously. It's Joshua Palmer for this Charger team. And when you have a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who's got a lot of talent and gets that football down the field and gets it in places, even though it's not a great matchup with the Kansas City Chiefs, I think Palmer could go out there. Decent option if McConkey misses time. Next receiver, Ray McLeod of the Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins, another quarterback that likes spreading the football out. In the last 2 weeks in a row, double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues here for Ray McLeod. So the last few weeks, week 10 in New Orleans, a carry 6 yards, 3 catches, 30 yards in that game. Week 11 at Denver, 4 catches, 46 yards. And week 13 versus the Chargers, 4 catches, 95 yards, 6 targets. He's the deep ball threat Darnell Mooney, we know, has been a solid number 2 wide receiver all season long, and Drake London, the number 1 wideout for this Atlanta Falcon team. But like I said, Kirk Cousins, he's a quarterback that spreads the football out. We know he's a gunslinger. He's going to turn the football a lot over at times. We saw it in last week's game with 4 interceptions. But him and McLeod have a great rapport. And now with a decent matchup coming up in Minnesota, I know on paper, overall, their defense is great, but they do give up the second most fantasy points to receivers on the season. So McLeod out there in 86% of fantasy leagues. And the final wide receiver I look to get off the wire is Parker Washington, a Jacksonville Jaguar. So Parker Washington, number 2 wide receiver for this Jacksonville Jaguar team behind Brian Thomas Jr. And he's available in 99% of fantasy leagues. So we saw flashes from Parker Washington a few years ago, but we didn't see much so far this year until a breakout game in Week 13 versus Houston. 6 catches, 103 yards, a touchdown, and 2-point conversion on 12 targets. And Mac Jones is going to be the starter, I assume, after Trevor Lawrence took a dirty hit, and he's out with a concussion, most likely getting carted off in that ball game. And Parker Washington and Mac Jones working the second team all off-season, all training camp, where they got the rapport down, and it obviously showed in the Week 13 game once Lawrence went out and Jones came in. So Washington out there 99% of fantasy leagues, and he's definitely a wide receiver right now who's a starter for this Jaguar team. And coming off a big game to head off the wire this week, few receivers I look to head off the waiver wire for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.